Senator Moore.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. March 21st is the annual World Down Syndrome Day. Today in the Senate we passed a motion which was celebrated in the Senate that acknowledged that fact and also talked about the fact that we're currently in the middle of the 4th World Down Syndrome Conference, which is held at the UN, and this year's theme is My Opportunities, My Choices, enjoying full and equal rights and the role of families for the Down syndrome community. We also in that motion celebrated the work of Down Syndrome Australia and the number of Australians who are attending that conference, because within the international movement, Down Syndrome Australia has a very proud place. Today, also, in acknowledging the importance of World Down Syndrome Day, there was a function hosted by Down Syndrome Australia and also Parliamentary Friends of Disabilities, which talked about the importance of Down Syndrome Day and also launched, have a pre-launch, because the official launch of the wonderful Down Syndrome Day advertisement will be in the UN, we think, as with the time difference tomorrow. So we're just preempting it a bit, Madam Acting Deputy President. But in line with the fact that we're talking about independence, we're having a campaign which is actually sponsored by Core Down, which is the coordinator of National Associations of People with Down Syndrome, which was created in 2003 and represents 74 Italian associations. But Core Down tomorrow will launch its new international campaign, which focuses on the notion of autonomous living for people with Down syndrome, including that very special feeling of independence of moving into your own home. We all know that this is a fairly common dream, though increasingly expensive, Madam Acting Deputy President, of most young couples. And this splendid advertisement that was co-produced with the help of Down Syndrome Australia, Down Madrid, and the participation of Down Syndrome Development Trust UK, Movimento Down in Brazil, Saving Downs New Zealand, National Down Syndrome Society US and Japan Down Syndrome Society, has the story of Salvatore and Caterina. These are two young people who are living with Down syndrome. Their story builds, and it builds up into a wonderful synopsis which gathers you into the story about these two young people who are living together, and Salvatore decides he wishes to ask Caterina to be his wife and have a proposal at work in a McDonald's shop. And McDonald's is a wonderful employer of people with Down syndrome across the globe. But this YouTube, which we can all watch, actually shows a cappella vocal group, Nere de Picasso, which is quite famous, accompanying Salvatore singing Come Away With Me by Norah Jones, where he kneels and actually asks Caterina to marry him. We then see that after this particular process, the chance that they're living together in their own home, independently, strongly, celebrating their lives together. And this is the theme of World Down Syndrome Day this year, to acknowledge independence, to show that people with Down syndrome have the capacity, the knowledge, the ability to run their own lives, and that all they ask from the rest of the community is support and acknowledgement and respect. So this wonderful program, and I actually do encourage people to look onto the Core Down YouTube channel and watch this project called The Special Proposal. This follows on from, I have to admit, one of my favourites, Madam Acting Deputy President, which was the YouTube that was created last year in the same process by the wonderful company of Saatchi & Saatchi, who provide their expertise to Core Down in this project. And Mr. Giuseppe Caseria, the CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi Italy and France, actually says that Core Down understands that an innovative approach can make a real difference. But last year's YouTube, it's a real killer, Madam Acting Deputy President, talked about the special bond between a mum and her child. And I'm going to read the text of last year's, which was talking about the experience of a mother finding out that her baby has been identified as having Down syndrome. And the theme is that a mum, her over voice says, "I'm scared. What kind of life will my child have?" And then it moves on to a series of discussions with young people who have Down syndrome, young boys, young men, and I'll just read what they say. Dear future mum, don't be afraid. Your child will be able to do many things. He'll be able to hug you, he'll be able to run towards you, he'll be able to speak and tell you he loves you. He'll be able to go to school like everybody else. He'll be able to learn to write, and he'll be able to write to you if somebody is far away, because indeed he'll be able to travel too. He'll be able to help his father fix his bicycle. He'll be able to work and earn money, and with that money he'll be able to invite you out for dinner, or rent an apartment, or go living alone. Mum, sometimes it will be difficult, very difficult, almost impossible. But isn't that the same for all mothers? Dear future mum, your child can be happy, and you'll be happy too. And through that scene, through the speeches, it was the young people making this statement, and then at the end, the young people and their mums came together on screen, and it says, people with Down syndrome can live a happy life. Together we can make it possible. Dear future mum. That is also available on the internet, Madam Acting Deputy President, and I defy anyone to have a dry eye while watching that, because again what it talks about is the independence and the ability of people with Down syndrome. Today at the morning tea, which we had, where again people without dry eyes were all standing together and watching these two films which actually engage with the community. We were talking with Angus Houston, who came along to speak about what's happening in Australia and talk about what Down Syndrome Australia is prioritising. And naturally, it's no surprise what the future and the process of Down syndrome is ensuring education and employment equality. And the core of breaking down that aspect of difference, the aspect that we would have no opportunity to have open education processes, is a sense of low expectation, that there's somehow a lower expectation for people with Down syndrome, and that is just not right. And in his comments, Mr Houston said that the low expectation barriers people with Down syndrome face include the low expectation environment that saw a couple abandon a twin in Thailand because the child had Down syndrome. The low expectation environment that led to a recent Senate inquiry into the involuntary sterilisation of girls and women with disabilities. I was fortunate enough to be involved in that inquiry, Madam Acting Deputy President, and again it was a feeling of low expectation for anyone with disabilities, so that young women were not given the right to make choices for themselves, but for their own good, and I stress that, for their own good, people outside themselves could determine whether they should be sterilised and not have choices. The low expectation in a country that sees Australia ranked 21 out of 29 OECD countries in relation to employment participation rates for people with disability. And when these numbers are even worse, Madam Deputy President, when we actually isolate the figures for people with intellectual disability. We can listen to the voices of people with disability, and particularly today for people in the Down syndrome community. They tell us, don't be afraid, mum. They tell us that they want to have their own lives and their independence. And when you see Salvatore and Caterina, after that incredibly romantic experience, when you see them sitting together, looking at their own home, you know there's hope. And you know that they don't have low expectations of their own lives. And they don't care whether other people have low expectations either, because they can do it. What they need from us, what they need from the wider community, is support and respect. So it's a wonderful thing that today our Parliament has actually moved a motion to acknowledge World Down Syndrome Day. We have messages to learn, but I think as a result of opportunities, watching Salvatore and Caterina and those wonderful young people and their mums, we have hope. we must have hope.
Thank you, Senator Moore.